Hi, and welcome back to Unmasking the Trans Movement with John Euler. I'm Brad Wilder. Today on the show, Robin Atkins is here, John Euler and Dr. Ann Gillies. We've got a lot to get to today, John. We're talking about the predators today. The predators that not only are out there in everyday society and where they are coming at our kids from, but also the predators that have manipulated people like Robin, for example, and caused her to have that journey that she's had to undertake. Thank you for being on the show today.
And Brad, we are privileged to have Robin back with us, Robin Atkins, and Dr. Ann Gillies is with us. Robin was here previously. Her story and her knowledge are so important to helping unmask the trans movement, especially the predators within that. So we invited her back. She was gracious enough. We're going to really embark on a series based upon her knowledge, her professional experience, her professional background, and her personal story. It is a compelling one, and people need to understand how predators are utilizing the trans movement to gain access to kids. And Dr. Ann Gillies has written a book, a personal story, so this will be compelling for all of us. Ann, would you do the honors?
I'd love to. This is compelling. Robin, thank you so much for coming on with us today. We have very similar journeys. I mean, there's lots of differences as well, but certainly our past history and family history, and then educational. We both are graduates from Liberty University, which I was so excited to see that on your wall. I need to put mine on this wall instead of the one behind me or in front of me. So I'm really, really happy to have you talk about the things that happen in the stages of grooming. We're going to talk about all of those things as well. And I think as difficult as it is to hear these kind of stories, it is so, so important. That's why I wrote Damaged by the Predators Among Us, because people need to understand it's not only out there someplace, we think in some secluded alley. It's right in front of us, and it's sometimes even in our homes and often in our churches. But churches are often targeted because we want to love people. Christians want to love people, and so that's kind of how we get to be targeted, because we kind of welcome in a lot of people who have other agendas, and that's really hard. So there's a whole thing, a lot of stuff we need to get to. So Robin, thank you again. And I guess where we begin maybe is a little bit of your personal story, and then you can segue from that. How does that sound?
Sounds great. Thank you so much again, Brad, John, and Ann, for having me on again. I'm honored to be here. And I just want to echo what you said, Ann, that some of the things I'm going to be sharing about my personal journey are very difficult to hear. And so for the listener, just be prepared. And I want people to know it's not difficult for me to talk about because I talk about it so frequently. So don't worry about me in the process, but if you're reacting to it in some way that feels uncomfortable, it's okay to come back to it, take a break and come back to it. But I do think we need to talk about how these things happen, how predatory behaviors work, and why I am so terrified about what's happening in schools with the trans movement and how it parallels my experience. So I was molested as a child, and it wasn't something that I even had an understanding of until adulthood, what happened, because like so many parents, I think my parents thought by not discussing it with me when I was a young child that they were shielding me from it, or somehow I would forget it, or like it wouldn't be a part of my life. But by 8 years old, I was acting out sexual behaviors that were very maladaptive for an 8-year-old. It is normal for a 4 or 5-year-old girl to, and I forgive, again, I know this is going to be delicate for some people, but for her to explore her body and maybe insert objects into her vagina. It is not normal for an 8-year-old to masturbate with objects. And so that's where I was at 8 years old. And I didn't know why. I didn't have a memory of what had happened to me at 8, because what happened to me happened before the age of 5. But I knew that that was behavior was unacceptable. I was hiding it. And when it was revealed, because I started acting out on other children by age 10 who were younger than me, I was just kind of labeled a bad kid or a dangerous kid. And I think that happens a lot to children who have been victims of sexual assault, that they don't know how to incorporate what's happened to them. They don't even have a language for it, and they don't know how to incorporate it into their life moving forward. And so they're acting out partly because they don't know that that's not what you're supposed to do. No one's ever talked to them about it. And also as a way of a cry for help. Unfortunately, some of these kids, especially nowadays, get labeled as predators themselves when really they're victims that need healing. And so what I want to share about my personal story is, for me, it was a neighbor. So neighbor next door isolated me when we were playing from the other kids, was older, was a child, but was much older. And I, like every young child, emulated the older kids and wanted to be just like them, and so would very willingly spend time alone with this child. And they isolated me to the point where they could molest me. They gained my trust. They created secrecy, made me feel special in that secrecy, and separated me from the people that were there to protect me and guard me. And that's what I see happening in the schools, in a step-by-step process of when we have children that are presenting with a whole host of mental health complications, because gender dysphoria never presents alone, ever. There's always other factors. The schools are focusing on one, which is self-IDing of trans, and saying, oh, you're at risk of a higher rate of suicide. And so what we're going to do is we're going to tell you we are your safe place. The school is your safe place, and we will protect you from your parents. So they're gaining the trust of these kids who are victims waiting to be perpetrated on. And we're going to gain your trust. We're going to provide some secrecy. We're going to isolate you. We're going to villainize the people that are your caregivers. And from a clinical perspective, if a child has a higher rate of suicidal ideation, the last thing we want to do is keep that from the people that are there with them most of the time, their parents. So the whole thing doesn't make sense from a clinical perspective, but when you look at it from how predatory behavior works, it's following along the same exact path of what happened to me.
That's really interesting.
Go ahead.
Sorry. You said something, Robin, about the schools now, the safe place, but it really tweaked something for me, because I went to elementary school in the 60s, a long time ago. But I want to say, for me, public school in those years was my safe place, because my home was so chaotic. My dad was a violent alcoholic. My mom was struggling with mental health, schizophrenia, paranoia, those kind of things. So school for me was a place of normalcy. It was the only place I felt, other than my grandfather, the only place I felt that I could really actually be safe. And I was safe pretty much there. There was some bullying that went on, but as John had said in another show, every single child has been bullied. Let's get this straight. But school was safe for me then. I cannot imagine if in the home situation that I had back then, was living and going to school. I'm still alive, but going to school in this decade. And because it wouldn't have been safe at home for me, but now it's no longer safe for me at school, because even though, I can go and maybe there's some people I can talk to, the reality is, as a tomboy, and I was, that I would be so quickly segued in to the whole cross-sex identifying agenda so quickly. And so it wouldn't be safe at home, wouldn't be safe at school. So you can imagine how the suicide rate goes up right? For these kids. It's not hard to imagine. Anyways,
It's funny you bring up the suicide rate, because that's something that's affected my local school division here where I live, and I know 3 students who used to play hockey, don't anymore, but it was because one of their siblings actually took their own lives, and it's tragic. It's sad. Now, what caused these kids to do that? It wasn't transgenderism. This happened at the start or just into COVID. The parents not being home all day, kids left alone all day, kids not allowed to go to school, parents, still had to go to work, some of them, and then they forced mandatory lockdowns on all of us. Then all of a sudden you see the family dynamic really being, disturbed. And moms and dads home all the time. The only thing to do is grab some more booze and let's make sure we have a great supper and let's have a good day today. And, life will be back on track soon, and, trying to stay positive. But the reality is the kids went through so much more than an adult did during this whole lockdown situation. And then they return to this nonsense. And, kids are confused right now, very confused. I know several males and females who just are going through probably the roughest time of their lives.
Yeah.
They didn't just return to this. While we were in lockdown, kids were on screens majority of their day, right where predators are waiting for them. And we have single parents who have to choose between staying at home to protect their children or going to work to feed their children. Yeah. So you have 6, 7, 8-year-olds at home alone in my city, and they're online on screens. And so it's not accidental that the push for gender ideology and queer theory is happening on the coattails of COVID. It's not on accident.
No, they're waiting for their moment to pounce, right?
Right. Well, and if you look at the change in like the American School Counselor Association's bullet points and their policies, the change in those came right during COVID, where suddenly now we went from, if a child comes in identifying as trans, we talk to the parents and we start there. It changed during COVID to now we talk with a student, we assume the student is correct in their self-ID, and we choose whether or not to disclose to parents based on our own personal opinions, not based on any court system saying the parents are unsafe.
Or not based on any mental health standard.
Correct.
We're not taking care of these children. Teachers and the children themselves are diagnosing. Teachers have no right to diagnose these children. It's so ludicrous to think this is happening.
Yeah, there's something really wrong here.
Yeah, school counselors can't diagnose and can't treat. And I do understand some school systems have psychiatrists, psychologists, or actual licensed counselors on staff. I do understand that. But for those that don't, we have school counselors letting students self-ID. School counselors can't diagnose, so they can't even explore comorbidities, and they're just going along.
I want to ask you where the course is. What course does a teacher go through other than the personal development days? They call them PD days here in Canada, where, the kids get the day off school, the teachers all head over to the local university and get indoctrinated some more. Now, we're not talking about a full-on course here that they have to go to school for a year or 2 years to really learn the ins and outs of what this movement is about. Instead, they've gone backdoor with the indoctrination at the university level, and then they turn around and they think they know what the hell they're talking about, and the bottom line is they don't. And you know what? The proof is right here on our show. And as a parent, I want everybody to be educated on this, because if you don't get educated, these people are going to continue to manipulate and cause this heinous crime.
Well, I want to piggyback off that, if that's okay, Anne, because what's partly so important about my story is it was finally my mother that revealed to me in my 40s that it was the neighbor. And there had been files or charges filed. It went to that extent. But they didn't talk about it with me at all. So if we have parents afraid to talk to their kids about these topics, then these kids are much more at risk of having this happen to them. And so you've got these adults at school who are telling kids that, yes, your parents aren't going to understand you. They're your enemy. We're going to keep you safe. We're going to keep your secret. We don't have to tell. And they're being told to, be afraid of their parents. And the parents are too afraid to talk about these topics. We're basically abandoning our kids to the ideology.
Look, guidance counselors have no place in mental health treatment whatsoever, as far as I'm concerned. You're a counselor of guidance. You're a guidance counselor. Get that through their heads, number one. Every day, my daughter misses a day in school. It's not the front desk of the office that calls. It's actually the guidance counselor. All right, and they call and they check up on her. They also text her and send her texts and emails. Hey, how are you doing today? Are things okay? You missed class yesterday. So they do follow up. Why are they following up like that? Why aren't they calling the parents? Why don't they let the parents know? I haven't seen any notifications on my email in a long time that my daughter's missed this class or that class. So I got to be honest with you. They think they own our kids. And I'm pretty well sick of it. And it's just another discussion and another great topic that we're going to have down the road.
You're right. I wanted to just say something else that you brought up, Brad, and then I'm going to shut up. And that is, you asked what right the teachers have. Well, way back about 2016, 2017, at least this was happening in Canada, specifically Ontario, teachers were they were mandated to go through sensitization courses, right? So they didn't have a course. This isn't a university course. This is
right.
An ideological sensitization day. And if they didn't get it right the first time, they had to go again.
It's about I just want to make biology. I want to make this clear. It's about as important as, say, the Respect in Sport program that Hockey Canada facilitates all of our players and members with every single year. It's got that kind of depth to it. It's got those kind of pictures to go along with it. It's a nice little picture PowerPoint presentation. Make sure you watch it for an hour and a half. Take our little quiz here and fill in the blanks that you know what you're talking about. And that's good enough. You don't really have to dive into the subject very deep, but you believe what we tell you. This is all nonsense already.
And then you choose, the teachers choose, instead of thinking for themselves, to affirm children's delusions about who they are. And this is the deepest corruption, really.
You call it affirm their delusions, but I don't even think they're affirming them. I think that they're pushing it. I think that they're...
Oh, that's true.
I'm going to say the word. I think that they're grooming it. The more you talk about it, it's just like advertising. The more you repeat it, the more people believe it.
And I think grooming is an actual term. It's not just sexual, but we used to use the term brainwashing. Now we'll say unduly influencing. We'll say mental and emotional manipulation. And Robin, what's so powerful about this platform, Unmasking the Trans Movement, is that we are endeavoring to help good people, parents and others, really connect the dots, both on a macro, a very high level, large scale view, and down to exactly what we're talking about now, the micro level. How is this done? And what I've emphasized before is that the pushers of this grand deception utilize and implement the best of cult-like methodology and techniques. That's what predators use. So a manipulator, perpetrator, predator, groomer, whatever we want to call these individuals, they use very specific methods to override intuition. And the one thing that sexual abuse survivors and those on the autism spectrum, which comprises the vast majority of the kids that get sucked into the trans movement, recruited, talk about grooming, it's recruitment and retention, is they have a very hard time understanding what they feel. And
it actually is worse than that, because even those of us who have gone through therapy to learn what our PTSD symptoms are and what our sympathetic nervous system is, and to trust that, we are told that we can't trust our own eyes. So if I have a man in front of me dressed like a woman, I'm supposed to ignore my sympathetic nervous system telling me that this is a man who is somehow trying to appropriate my biology. That's threatening to me. If you want me to lie, you're a dangerous person. and you're asking me to lie, and you're telling me I'm a bigot if I won't.
That's right.
So it's even survivors who are very attuned to, like, this person is potentially dangerous, are told you're a bad person if you don't listen to your sympathetic nervous system.
There you
But
go. That's right. So it's not only ignore what you're feeling, but you're actually wrong or bad, and how dare you for feeling it? Wow.
Right. And I was talking to someone yesterday about, it goes back, there's a few generational gaps at play here too. It goes back to the 80s. So I'm Gen X. I grew up in the 80s, early 90s. And for us, the word sexuality meant attraction of a sexual nature, who you want to engage in sexual activity with. And which makes sense, because the base word for sexuality is the adjective sexual, and the base word for the adjective sexual is sex, the act of sex. And so we grew up thinking sexuality was who you were interested in having sex with. So children didn't have sexuality. I was never asked as a child, what's your sexuality? What's your sexual orientation? Not once. Now we have schools asking 9-year-olds, what's your sexuality?
5-year-olds.
9-year-olds aren't having sex. So they don't have a sexuality. Now, yes, 9-year-olds get crushes, but crushes can be based on, you're really funny, or you're really popular, or I really like the horse you own. Can I come play? Like, crushes aren't necessarily based on romantic or sexual. I have crushes all the time. I have intellectual crushes nonstop. If I thought they were all sexual, I'd be in a lot of trouble. I have no sexual crushes other than my husband. So I think this idea that we've mixed appreciation, admiration, attraction with sex, and now we're pushing that on children as if just because you have a girl or boy in class that you like more than the others, that's your sexuality, is so extremely harmful. And that's part of the predation. We are going to change the words on you. We're going to gain your trust and tell you we're safe because you can disclose that to me. And we have parents terrified if their children have crushes of the same sex. What's happening there, why, what's going on, when that's pretty normal because they're not sexual crushes. They're admiration crushes. And so parents are afraid to talk about it. Schools are telling them, nope, that means you're bi or gay. And they're not sexual.
Well, and this is a whole issue. And thinking back on, same for you, Robin, those early school years, and thinking of how closely knit girlfriends could be. It was like now when you say love, you say, I love my girlfriend. It was like, I just want to be with her. There was nothing sexual, and there should never be anything sexual for these, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, even into mid-teens. Like girls kind of hung out, and little girls used to walk down the street holding hands, and it was non-sexual. It's all part of the sexualization of our society over the last 70 years. And these organizations and Big Pharma and everything else that's involved, them follow the money, they have all pushed this so radically on our children that the normative kind of expression of kindness and love and being together has been thrown out the window, because now, just like you said, they have to identify, and children are so confused, and so they'll just say, well, I'm bisexual, I'm bi, because they don't know what to do. Why do I have to identify? I just want to be with my friend. Yeah, it's
that's a great segue into what we're going to be talking about the next time we meet, because I'm going to be moving into my preteen and teen years and about the events that happened during those times that were building off of the abuse that I had as a child, and how confusing sexuality was to me and how wrong I was about what was going on with me. So it's a great segue into our next talk.
Awesome. That's good.
And Robin, as you just said, how wrong you were, that wasn't like shame on you, wrong. It's just in terms of your perspective, your perception, that it had become skewed, not through no fault of your own. And that's what's so powerful, because we're talking to survivors right now. More and more young people are starting to tune in. Our viewers are primarily adults, but as time goes on, hopefully those that are detransitioning, you are speaking to young people, no doubt.
Well, I would love to say to detransitioners and survivors of sexual assault who made choices based on their experiences that they now regret, you are not to blame for what was done to you. You are not to blame for the way you were groomed into behaviors or thoughts or ideologies that you didn't openly consenting choose to. And I am with you in your search for healing.
Robin Atkins, would you be willing to stay right there? We're going to continue on with part 2 of this important topic and episode. We're going to then get into details. You're going to begin to help us really understand how those that have designs to cross boundaries, those that are predators, how that happens, and how the trans movement is the perfect opportunity. There are others as well, and as you brought up, churches. My greatest concerns are churches and the trans movement. Those are a predator's best friend. How can I say that? Well, 14 years of working with sexual predators. That's how I can say that. So, Brad, thank you. This is another compelling episode. Nobody knows this better than Robin Atkins.
Absolutely. Thank you all for being here. Part 2 will be compelling, and it'll lead to a whole lot of great information for parents, grandparents, and again, children that are faced with this in everyday life. It's important that you know. You can find us on BitChute at our BitChute channel. Okay, that's Unmasking the Trans Movement. Just type it in the search. You'll find us. You can like, share, subscribe. As well, you can also find us at our website, too. We hang out there a lot at unmaskingthetransmovement.com. Till next time, remember, it's not our kids' fight, it's our fight. I'll see you soon.